Whitman, former EPA administrator, is up next. We're going to be talking about nuclear power, climate change, and the energy bill that's coming before the Senate. Well, yesterday, Senate Leader Harry Reid spoke about the energy bill. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
At the G8 summit last week, President Bush's so-called bold approach to global warming was to give the issue serious consideration. But that was in the future. Or in other words, ignore it. The time for meetings, and more blue ribbon panels is long past. It's time for action, time for bold steps and big ideas. It's time for innovation. We're not getting it from the White House, but that won't stop us because innovation is exactly what Americans do best. The Democratic Energy Plan is all about harnessing power, the clean, renewable power that exists literally all around us, and the power of ingenuity that we have always called upon to solve our toughest problems that exist literally all around us. Our starting point is a bill we'll debate this week. Our bill promotes energy efficiency, drives investment in clean alternative fuels. It sets new green standards for federal buildings and protects consumers from punishing price gougers. Shouldn't we punish price gougers? Of course. After 6.5 years of the Bush presidency, our bill puts the common good ahead of corporate greed.
On your screen is Christy Todd Whitman, former EPA administrator for the Bush administration. Administrator Whitman, this article in the Washington Times, Reid offers course for energy independence. It's a speech we covered yesterday. However, he doesn't mention nuclear power.
That's not really surprising, given it's Harry Reid and the fact that Yucca Mountain is the legally designated site for the repository of spent nuclear rods. So if he gets into that discussion too much, he's got to deal with the fact that there are spent nuclear rods and he doesn't want them in Yucca Mountain. But he is not against nuclear power. He has said that in the past. And so he's in a bit of a conundrum at the moment, but I believe there are ways to work around that.
How so?
Well, first of all, it's recycling. Recycling, we can do a lot more with recycling than we are in this country. If you look at what France is doing, Japan is doing. Actually, the interesting thing is that there's only almost 97% of the energy left in those rods when they've been used 3 times as they are today. So the economics, I believe, are going to come to a point where they're really going to push better focus on it. And the recycling can get it down to, you're only talking about 2 or 3% of fissionable material. So that greatly reduces the amount that has to be stored. We're looking, I mean, obviously now the nuclear rods are stored on site in holding ponds and then above ground after they've been in the holding ponds for 3 to 5 years, then in hard storage outside, and they're really very safe, but that's not ideal. There's going to have to be a national repository at some point.
Does it have to be Yucca Mountain?
No, it doesn't have to be Yucca Mountain. The legislation now calls for Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain would seem to be a good place. It's understandable that nobody kind of wants this in their backyard. The NIMBY works, and of course Harry Reid's in a very strong position right now to make sure that that holds.
Is nuclear power, in your view, important to our energy security in the U.S.?
Very much so. Nuclear power, first of all, it's 20% of our power today. And we're looking at a potential, well, projected increase in demand of 40% by 2030. That's a huge amount of demand that we're going to have to come up with. The nice thing about nuclear is, first of all, we have lots of uranium here. We don't have to import it. It burns clean. The reason I like it and I'm comfortable saying that we ought to be looking at nuclear and we ought to at least ensure that it stay at 20%, if not get it to 25%, is that it's affordable. Once it's up and running, it's the most affordable form of energy. It doesn't release any greenhouse gases or any regulated gases, no SOx, SO2, nitrogen oxide, mercury, none of those things that are problematic for human health and the environment. And it is something that we can rely on. And it is domestic. So it should play a role. And what we need to do in order to be able to engage in the discussion is get some of the facts out there so people really understand. They're legitimate questions that people ask about nuclear. And we need to answer those. I believe we can. I believe we can answer them in a way that will give people a level of comfort to say that while I'm a firm believer in doing more about recycling, doing more on renewables, they're still only at 2 and 7% of our energy. Now hydropower is about 7%. You can double and triple that and you're not going to get to a point where you're going to have the kind of base load certainty that you need, reliable and affordable power.
You are currently the head or the co-chair of a group called Clean and Safe Energy Coalition.
Right.
What is that about?
That's about nuclear energy. It's about getting that discussion going and getting the facts out there so people can make informed decisions. It's about building and getting people to, and organizations, there are over 1,000 members now. They are all different kinds of organizations, from labor unions to some religious groups to universities to individuals who are saying, let's have another look. As one environmentalist said to me, if you're against asthma and you're against climate change, you've got to start thinking about nuclear. It's not that they're embracing it, but just you've got to start thinking about it.
Our guest was EPA Administrator for 3 years, former Governor of New Jersey, and former head of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Would it be fair to say that you would be against having a Yucca Mountain type repository in New Jersey?
No, it depends on how they do it, but you know, New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the nation, so it'd be hard to find a site. The one thing about Yucca Mountain is, in all fairness, it is a pretty remote site. Yes, there are people, but there are few ranches and there are not many towns. It's really very remote. There is a mountain there where you can get underground. It meets a whole lot of safety standards, and it really is quite far away from something like in New Jersey. Anywhere on the East Coast where you have that dense population is really not practicable.
Before we go to calls, what do you think of the agreement on global warming or climate change that came out of the G8?
Well, I was very glad to see it happen. Frankly, it engages now the United States. It's back engaged with the rest of the world, and it brings China and India to the table, which were two big holes in the previous Kyoto process. So this isn't Kyoto. This is something different. Brings everybody to the table. It's not the mandatory cap that many would like, but frankly, you know, I will tell you, I think many of the European countries are kind of breathing a sigh of relief because they were not meeting their budgets or their targets under Kyoto. And they were going to have a very hard time in the next round when they negotiate the next round of cuts. So while they may put up a bit of a protest, it's not as much as they might have otherwise.